Good morning, folks. Everything new under the sun. I apologize for the delay in some of the videos. You're going to see another couple of days here as I'm busy over the weekend with family things. But Bible prophecy doesn't stop, and time continues to tick away. Now, I like this image. It shows the idea of birth pains and the birth pains increasing in frequency and intensity. You have these long waves out in the deep ocean, and they don't look too bad. They're not very high. They're not very frequent. But as you get to the last days, where time is wrapping up, and in this case, the seafloor is coming up underneath the water, those waves all of a sudden start getting higher. They increase in frequency and intensity. They get faster, and they get higher as waves. So you can see that until finally, when they come up against the shore, they actually crash. They explode, if you will, in the last days. And that happens very quickly as it comes up on shore. Now, Matthew 24 speaks of the beginnings of sorrows, or the beginnings of birth pains. And Matthew 24 says, "And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. And Jesus said unto them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another." Now let me go so here's Matthew 24. "There shall not be one stone left upon another that shall not be thrown down. And as he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us, when shall these things be? What shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And Jesus answered, Take heed that no man deceive you." So deception in the last days. Think about mainstream media and narratives and the thing of the day. All these things are meant to deceive, to distract, to turn people away from the last days, biblical eschatology. They're meant to confuse you and to kind of keep you tied up. All the screens in your cell phones, those are meant to simply consume your time so that you're not causing trouble for the government or for society, etc. So false Christs are coming. "For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars." Do you hear of wars and rumors of wars? They continually, Joe Biden himself, continually suggests that, if we do this or that in Ukraine, if we accept Ukraine into NATO membership, that would be World War III. Remember a year ago he was saying if we send tanks and airplanes to Ukraine, that would be World War III. What are they sending to Ukraine now? Tanks and airplanes. F-16s are on the way, and Putin has something to say about that, doesn't he? "Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of war. See that ye are not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. The end is not yet." So that's not the end. That's just the beginning of the end, if you will. This is the idea of the birth pains spinning up. "For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines, pestilences, and earthquakes in diverse places." All these are the beginnings of the birth pains, the beginnings. So we're back here at the left-hand side of the page of the image there, where you can see the waves, but they're not big. People don't really recognize them as what they are. That's because we're in deep water. We're still a little ways out. But again, as we get closer to the return of the Lord, these things will increase in frequency and intensity. I don't think we've seen the significant famines or the significant pestilences quite yet. We're starting to see indications of it as mainstream media is, pushing the idea of extreme weather events, and I believe there will be extreme weather events in the last days. Of course, they're not caused by man-made climate change specifically, more related to, I think, the sin of man and what's going on Earth, what we're doing. But yeah, these are the beginnings of sorrows, and so we're in the situation on the left-hand side of this image where people, there's waves, but we kind of get through them. They're not too big, tall, not too low at the bottom, and so we kind of surf through them. The government pays us enough money to kind of get through it. We just got a government handout for groceries in Canada to put up with the high price of groceries. Well, sure, they can do that, and that gets you through these kind of long, low waves, but when things get more frequent and intense, that's not going to work anymore. And again, you have to talk about the debt situation. So let's go to let's look what is happening in France here. So this idea of global control, global military control, martial law, complete control of the citizens, and unrest and violence. The Bible says all these things are happening in the last days. And let's look at this one more time. And these are kind of my pillars well, these are the pillars of Bible prophecy. This is just the progression of things. I have pillars of Bible prophecy somewhere. Anyways, it kind of kicked off with the COVID pandemic. It was an interesting, world-changing, global world-changing thing that happened. Really, never before had there been something push on us globally in all sectors, all nations, where we were forced to into lockdown. We were forced to wear masks. We were, coerced into other things. You know what I mean? Never on the world stage did something happen all around the world like that. There was things that happened in Europe, in North America, maybe in South Africa, but not globally, not a global organization and cooperation. And so that was a game-changing, a significant milestone in the world. I think what it comes out of that is economic collapse, and we're still dealing with that. They're still trying to paper over all the debt that's being created. But Putin said it correctly when he said that the U.S. is at the end of its rope economically. The U.S. dollar cannot be sustained. I think there's like 41 countries that are looking to move over to a gold standard. And this is all part of the BRICS nations thing. And if that were to happen, the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency would absolutely stop being the world reserve currency, because no one would buy it anymore. They would know it's worthless if you can go to a gold standard and know you can actually trade your money for like physical asset, physical gold. There's no reason why anybody would look for U.S. dollars anymore. So the BRICS organization of countries looking to go back to a gold standard is an existential threat. And that's why the U.S. will not give up the fight in Ukraine. We're going to talk about that. It's being said that, by the leader of Hungary, that the United States could end the war any day in Ukraine if they wanted to. And NATO nations don't even understand why the U.S. Doesn't want to end the war. U.S. has given them no reasons, but NATO and the countries in NATO know that the U.S. could stop it, and also know that the U.S. Does not want to stop the war, very specifically, which is interesting. Anyways, in France, you have this global, this significant lockdown, 130,000 officers for Bastille Day following the riots. And I think you'll see this expand through countries as the difference between economic situations in people, the immigration, etc., causes division, and of course the religious differences. It used to be that the U.S. and Canada were majority Christian, and that allowed a lot of peace, because a lot of our there was a lot of agreement on the basics of what is true, what is right, what is correct. Well, as you introduce more religions, they all have different ideas of what is right, what is correct, what they want to do. So you're going to see more civil unrest in countries where the religious base is changing. This is interesting here, because as the United States ceases, accepting Israel, helping them, blessing them, if you will, then the more the hand of God is removed in terms of blessing from the United States, from Canada, from any country that isn't on Israel's side, because Israel's still, God's people, the Jews, His chosen people, and that's what the tribulation is for. It's for the salvation of the Jewish nation, and God is going to show Himself to the Jews. But anybody who is against His people, well, He's not going to be particularly for anymore, right? So we have this idea of Biden ordering a reassessment of relations with Israel. This is Netanyahu. He's been the leader several times, for the past, 20 years. And all of a sudden, Biden wants to reassess relations. The Democrats don't like Israel. The Republicans are still strongly for Israel. But if Biden goes ahead with this, look for the hand of blessing on the U.S. and sorry, noise out my window. The hand of blessing on the U.S. and Canada and NATO nations to be removed. And is that why we don't see the U.S. in end-time Bible prophecy? I think so, because they've been destroyed, either by the hand of blessing being removed, or because of economic collapses has caused. I think whatever happens in the United States, I think it's because God is no longer blessing them, because they have turned against Israel. And indeed, in Ezekiel 38 and 39, U.S. is not coming to the aid of Israel. This is J-Post. Let's see if this will refresh here. Biden. This is one of the most extreme Israeli governments I've seen. So again, Biden, the United States, turning away from Israel. And if you don't support Israel, then God may have something to say about that, and I think he does. This is interesting. Speaking about, this is RT, Russia Today, maybe propaganda, you can consider it as you will. The U.S. could stop the Ukraine conflict instantly, and absolutely they could. NATO could, if they stopped supplying weapons. So this is the Viktor Orban. He is the Hungarian prime minister. He said the U.S. wants the conflict in Ukraine to continue and has failed to explain its reasons to NATO allies. So the NATO allies have no idea why the U.S. is pushing this, but the U.S. is kind of leading NATO into it, probably unwillingly into this conflict, and they have no idea why. He told a radio station that if Washington wished, it could stop the fighting at a moment's notice, as Kiev is fully dependent on the West in fighting Russia. If the Americans wanted it, at the bottom there, peace could come next morning. Doesn't everybody want peace? Well, no, the U.S. does not want peace. They could stop it. They could come to the bargaining table. They could bargain with Russia, come to some agreement. But there is no interest. Why Americans don't want that is a question that puzzles the entire world, Oban says. We didn't get an answer at the NATO summit, so the U.S. is simply not saying why. Now, currently, NATO is not letting Kiev in, Ukraine in, for many reasons, but one of them is the corruption in the country. Could it be that there's some collusion, corruption between the U.S. and Ukraine, and that's why they don't want to stop the war against Russia? Because there's a lot of money being made. You have to ask those questions, right? And money is involved in every conflict in this world at this point. It's all about money and power. These things never change, and they haven't changed for thousands of years. They're not going to change now. It's not because the United States is, a great righteous character on the world stage. They're absolutely not. A lot of wars have been started. Why are they still in Ukraine? That's the question. We've been saying this. I've been saying this since the beginning. There has been never one indication, one comment from the U.S. to say, let's go to the peace table. Let's talk about this with Russia. It's been Russia and China that have been saying, let's create peace. Let's come up with a peace deal. And the United States is pushing for war. You can't deny that. And you have to ask, why are they doing that? This is War News 247. Putin's ultimatum to NATO. He upgraded the F-16 mission in Ukraine to a nuclear threat from the West. And so this addition of F-16s to Ukraine suggests that forces Russia to consider it a potential nuclear threat. Russia cannot know if the F-16s will be dual purpose. They will be able to carry B-61 nuclear bombs. Therefore, there are no margins. Russia cannot risk a surprise nuclear attack. This is huge. When Russia can't know any further, if the U.S. is really setting up the arena for a nuclear first strike. If Russia can't know that that is not the case, then they have to assume that when any F-16 flies, it could be carrying a first strike nuclear weapon. And Putin has said that, and it's a nuclear threat. If Ukraine has U.S.-made F-16 fighter jets at its disposal, this will create new risks for Russia, existential, including in the field of nuclear security. So I think that's pretty significant, folks. So wars, rumors of wars, all these things happening in the last days. And we will continue to see this march toward war as we head into war and economic collapse. And they're going to be intertwined. You won't be able to tell the difference. One is going to be happening while the other is happening. People are going to say, well, the economic collapse is caused by the war. Other people will say, well, the war is because the U.S. is failing as the world reserve currency, and that's true. If the U.S. and the elites see that the economy is failing and that their currency is failing, they need to show that they are the world power, and therefore they need to kind of scare everybody, put everybody in their place by winning World War III. And I think this may be what they're leading to preempt the end of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency, as people move away from the U.S. dollar and move to a gold standard, i.e. the BRICS nations, etc. And so those are completely intertwined. One causes the other. Often, when things start failing, they simply take you to war because there's no other option. War is kind of the last effort to save the dying empire. So, war, economic collapse, job losses, famine is going to come out of that as supply chains grind to a halt, as money is worth less, and inflation kicks in, hyperinflation even kicks in. And then you have this idea of violence and the love of many growing cold, and that's from Matthew 24, verse 12, and it says, because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. So people stop caring for their brothers and sisters because they're desperate. They don't have anything to give anymore. They're just trying to survive on their own. And that means there'll be civil unrest, there'll be violence, there will be roving gangs looking for food, not because they want to, but because they have nothing, and they have nothing to lose at that point. They need to feed themselves to survive. It's going to be a question of survival. So it's going to become very violent, and there's going to be crime rampant everywhere. And it's going to be centered on the big cities where most of the population is. And you're going to have then a government clamp down on it. So you have this era of government control, the second last one before the world order and the mark of the beast, where the government is saying, we have to implement martial law because of the violence. We have to protect the citizens. And there is a truth to that. Because the citizens will be desperate, because the citizens won't have money or food. And then comes the world order and the mark of the beast system. Now we're already trained into global lockdowns, global control by the pandemic. So interesting, right? We go right to the beginning of the pandemic, where the whole world is now brainwashed and introduced to the idea, and now compliant with the idea of home arrest, a lockdown in your own house, wearing of masks in stores, and in the name of your public, your own personal safety and of the public, they will come out and say, you need to do this, you need to do that, and therefore you need to accept a mark of the beast, a computer chip in your right hand or your forehead, whatever it may be. They're not going to call it mark of the beast, of course. They're going to call it digital ID to prevent identity theft, to prevent violence, to prevent crime and fraud and money laundering. It will be all in the name of many good things to help society, and you can't disagree with that. But we know ultimately what it will be used for. In the Bible, it speaks about the Antichrist, the one world leader, coming into play, and I believe he comes out of World War III. We get to the brink of World War III, or maybe it gets triggered, and we could be there right now. By the way, watch Scotty Clark's 2030 video. Very interesting stuff. We're close to the time. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen. 2028, 2030. I'm looking towards 2030 now, since 2028 now looks a little close. I think a little bit more needs to be happening if 2028 is the end of 6,000 years, but we'll see. Again, it was based off the death of Jesus Christ, which we estimate to be about the year 28 after the start of the Gregorian calendar. But that's kind of unknown because we don't exactly know when Jesus was born. I think scholars believe he was born a couple of years before the start of the Gregorian calendar. So that would, the Gregorian is supposed to be based off the birth of Jesus Christ. But again, scholars believe that he actually was born 2, 3, maybe even 4 years prior to that, which then sets the date for his death, I think his death really is the milestone which sets off the last 2,000 years of the history of the world. And so we're close. We don't know exactly when, but we're very, very close, and we can see things, world events going. It looks like we're at an inflection point economically with world reserve currencies, with world hegemony and power. It looks like the U.S. is losing its power, and it will switch over to the next power. And I believe that next power will not be an individual country like China, but will be a global government, and there will be global government control. And that will kind of kick off the 7-year period. So we're getting close, folks. I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. We will look to get another video up for you, possibly Sunday night or heading into Monday. So have a good weekend, folks. Continue to get prepared. That's all I can say. And make sure you know the Lord Jesus Christ is your personal Lord and Savior. He's coming soon. We don't know exactly when. But we know that things are going to get hard, and I believe we will be here for the first 3.5 years, because that's just the tribulation of mankind on the world. That's not the wrath of God, I do not believe. And I have done videos about that, where the seals, to me, are not indicating the wrath of God, but the wrath of God starts when the sun and the moon go dark, which is after Revelation chapter 6 and the seals, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So we're going to be around for that, and a lot of people are going to be surprised, I think, when that occurs. So anyways, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.